All right, we've got economist Jerry Bowyer with us. He says, look, the fact of the matter is when people are even mentioning the word impeachment, and as Greg points out, even the possibility of collusion, even though that legally doesn't connect here, it does cost investors money. And Jerry has actually kind of outlined all of this brilliantly, as he always does. Jerry, good to see you.
Good to see you, Neil.
So let's go back in time a little bit. When all of this started first appearing, and to Greg's point, we're going back to June when this particular meeting happened, but it actually goes, in this case, back to the markets about a year later. He's President of the United States. Spell it out.
Yeah, and I think the impeachment thing, the impeachment kind of crusade really got started in May around the firing of James Comey. What we did is we looked at the data. What data did we look at? We looked at Google searches for impeachment. When did they spike? And we looked at the London odds makers' probability that Trump would not finish out his first term. And they kind of moved together. The interesting thing is that probability of impeachment, when that spiked, that coincided with the markets kind of topping out. In other words, right after Trump gets elected, you get a great bull market. And then the market kind of decelerates around all this impeachment talk. Now, I'm not saying he's going to get impeached, but the probability of impeachment is almost like a proxy for his lack of political capital, for the distraction. So my point is, this is costing us money. Now, if the Democrats have a smoking gun, then you follow the law and you impeach. But if you don't really have a crime, then they ought to follow the advice of someone a lot wiser than me, count the cost of what you're doing. Because when markets are getting stymied this way, it's bad for the economy, it's bad for our pension plans, it's bad for our retirement, it's bad for our college savings.
Yeah, and it can be problematic longer term. Maybe if they're not worried about that is Democrats or the president's critics, maybe that's another point. Jerry's column, by the way, is on our foxbusiness.com site. He kind of spells this out in detail. And it is a little uncanny what you see going on here. But obviously, every minute we talk about this is, as I always say, a minute we're not talking about these agenda items. Now, Washington can presumably do a lot of things at once, but you and I know the history is such they don't. So what do you think happens now with just the talk and fueled by the president's son with this meeting he said he never had that now he did have? Obviously, he's given his Trump critics more ammunition to dig, right?
Yeah, and that means that markets are looking at a higher probability that we won't get tax reform this year. And, you know, the worst situation is if you promise I'm going to give you tax cuts next year and you're not going to get them this year, then you know what you do in business? You defer your activity till next year. That's what happened to Reagan in '81.
That's right.
You know, Reagan made a deal with the Democrats where the tax cuts for the rich weren't going to kick in for a couple of years, and we had 2 really bad years. Bush made the same mistake in 2001, and it wasn't until the tax cuts actually got implemented in 2002 that the markets and the economy
started moving. Well, I have serious doubts if they don't get them done this year. They're not going to get done at all. They're the way they're sliding away on this. But do you think, Jerry, that the way it's going right now, that the effect of talking impeachment, even if it never comes to that, and I don't think it ever will, but what do I know?
Right.
You can stymie an agenda, and that's what this might be all about. Just stymie the agenda, just the thought that this goes out. And some of your friends can be shaken away. They can feel, gee, I don't want to do anything for this guy or with this guy because he's kryptonite.
Yeah, exactly. So members of Congress distance themselves from him. The other thing is it takes energy away from something else. You know, when Reagan did his tax cut, he worked closely with the Congress. The president drove the agenda. Bush, he drove the agenda. Bill Clinton, with his agenda when he first came into office, he drove the agenda. Only a president is big enough to drive a legislative agenda.
But this president isn't driving that agenda. They still don't know how he feels on some of these key aspects of tax reform, even how low the corporate rate should go, or for that matter, whether the rich should get a tax cut at all.
Yeah, the president has a relationship with his own party in Congress where he triangulates with them. And, you know, maybe we shouldn't have this tax cut. Maybe we ought to keep taxes high for the wealthy and all the rest of it. He creates uncertainty in his own party. I don't want to come off as though I'm blaming the Dems. You know, a couple of weeks ago, you did a monologue where you said, Mr. President, you're bringing this on yourself. I was proud of you for that. I think that's true. The president has created the ammunition that's being used to stymie his agenda.
And he's throwing his own people under the bus.
And grow into this office.
And I wonder, Jerry, when he said or tweeted out, I cannot imagine that Congress would dare to leave Washington without a beautiful new health care bill fully approved and ready to go. Now, that sounds like a threat, and maybe it's, you know, jawboning on the part of the leader of the free world pressuring, his party go along, but he doesn't have a great track record standing by his party. He does have more of a record throwing him under the bus if there are problems. Now, it's human nature to do that if everything hits the fan, but I don't remember Ronald Reagan doing that.
No, and, applying pressure without presence doesn't really work. You've got to be there. He's got to go to Congress. He's got to spend time with members of Congress. That's what every other president has done who has been legislatively successful. I have never seen a president in American history who got his agenda through the legislature by taking shots at his own ally and changing opinions from week to week about what he wants from them. He's got to lead this effort. He's got to get off the tweet. He's got to get off the Twitter. He's got to grow into the office. Look, he's got to make a decision. Is he going to be a Samson who pulls the temple down, or is he going to be a Solomon who builds the temple up? Is he going to be a builder, or is he just going to be a critic who stands outside the system throwing rocks at it? We need him to grow into the president that we need him to be.
And we also need him to take the responsibility for something. John Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs, you could argue cooked up by his predecessor, he took the blame for that. Now, Ronald Reagan, with the initial trouble that he had with getting tax cuts, he took the blame for the slow approach, what was deemed the slow approach at the time, to your point, that hurt some Republicans. But he took the blame. There is a difference.
Yeah, true leaders, they have to suffer to some degree for their people. Kennedy said, look, what did he say? Failure, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan.
Failure is an orphan, yeah.
The president has, look, I'm a Republican. Maybe they'll call me a globalist too, maybe because of my equator. But the president is kind of blowing a great opportunity here by not being really presidential. I don't mean presidential like all the other presidents.
No, I know what you're saying.
He's different. But he needs wisdom. He needs self-restraint, and he needs focus.
Yeah. But it does help to blame certain things on other people. Like this weight thing with me, Jerry, it's a thyroid issue. But I don't have time to get into it with you. But I'm telling you, very good catch.
Cannoli are priced too cheap.
Exactly.
It's entrapment.
Right. It is entrapment, exactly.
Predatory pricing.
I'm going after Entenmann's big time. All right, Jerry Boyd, so good seeing you. Please read his column on it. It is brilliant. It spells out whether you're right or left. It's going to get you annoyed, but it is uncannily prescient about some of the developments that happened in the past and what they could mean in the future.